All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Launchpad Podcast. It is your host, Gabriel Hardy, and in this episode today, I had the honor of sitting down with my buddy Daniel, who runs the integration community, TAM Integration. I wanted to speak to Daniel today because I have this thing where I really like finding companies, projects, and people that actually bring value within the space. And I do believe that Daniel does that. There's this long standing trend with content creation and creators and influencers or whatever where they get this traction, they get some audience, and then it's like, and you see this pattern repeated where they just want to extract from their audience, and eventually they either plateau or they fall off. And something I really respect about Daniel is that he comes through my Instagram feed randomly, and he always has these really sweet sort of insights and messages and things like that he shares to his Instagram page. Highly recommend you go follow him. But I could tell that, and you can tell this through the course of our conversation together, there is a certain amount of work that this human being has done on himself over the course of several years, which puts him in the place where he actually can provide people insight and value through the midst of their spiritual awakenings or psychedelic experiences or, what have you. But yeah, Daniel was really cool. We talk about psychedelic integration. We even real time kind of integrate and unpack some stuff together. Another area of conversation, another topic of conversation that was really important within this one was we talked about parenthood and fatherhood and kind of like integrating the psychedelic experience as a father or as a parent to a child. So if you have any children, highly recommend you stick around for this episode. And I also highly recommend that you go check out all of Daniel's stuff down in the description, show notes below, whatever you're listening to this on. But yeah, other than that, peace out. I hope you guys have a beautiful day, and thank you for listening.
I was just saying how something that I've been considering about the whole sort of tattoo thing over the past year or so is the sort of like, and it's hard to articulate, but like the energetic imprint that might potentially have, and it was interesting because my last tattoo that I was getting was this one on my throat here, and it was a new tattoo artist that I had went to. And I chose him because of their online presence. They looked like they were a little bit more conscious and things like that. And he was telling me about how he does, and it's something he does separately from their shop, but he does ceremonial tattoo work with like deer antlers and things like that. And it depends on certain places of people's bodies and things like that. But that seemed like a really interesting sort of line of work that I haven't heard a whole lot about yet. So I'd be really, really interested to talk to this guy in San Francisco.
There's also, speaking of which, there's also a guy, do you know Angus? Awaken to the One. Angus and his wife live in Asheville. Okay. And he spends most of his time, they're sort of homesteaders. And he spends a lot of his time distilling frankincense. But he's covered in tattoos, and his wife, I think, handles most of like this very ceremonial, thoughtful tattoo work and scarification. And I can pass you their contact info as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love that. And just like while we're talking about it, what do you think is happening there when somebody ceremonially does tattoo work? What do you think the kind of like matrix is around that?
Well, I mean, I think that vibration's a thing, depending on how you define it. And I think that it's always nice to be more conscious than less, and to have more love and less fear. And I mean, this first tattoo that I got, it irritates me sometimes. I feel like there's stuff to work out, from time to time, that like I'll be meditating and I have a I have a rich inner life, right? Like, so I've got almost like, like a synesthesia where it comes to like the confluences of like thoughts and emotions and energy and color and movement and stuff. And so it's like really, I think the term that the therapists and the researchers use are closed eye visuals, right? So I have closed eye visuals, but they're not just visual, right? I mean, you know how these things go. So there's light and sound and sensation and emotion, and it's kind of all swirled up into one. And it does sometimes, I find it gets caught in my left shoulder, where the tattoo is. And, I have some other sort of, as our other things, as we go through life, I won't bore you with the details, but, as we go through life, we take certain like knocks and bangs to our physical vehicle. And so there's other parts of the body that require healing over time because it's a scarification process. Right. And so there's no reason to think that those areas wouldn't want attention and maintenance from time to time. Right. Even like, what we know about vitamin C. You know about scurvy?
Of
Your
course.
listeners? You think your listeners what do you tell me? You tell me, because I only know, I feel like I only know enough to sound dumb.
Probably the same here. I would say what I know about scurvy is what I've been told, that if you don't consume enough vitamin C, essentially is one of the few vitamins that it seems like our body is not able to sort of like endogenously produce. A lot of other sort of vitamins and minerals and micronutrients our body is able to kind of compensate in other areas and pull from other areas if we're lacking, but vitamin C is one that we're not. And so with like lack of it, there's some really ugly sort of conditions and things that can set in supposedly. But it's also kind of like this question of, is that actually reality, or is that the reality that we all just kind of agree on? Or would you, with enough sort of focus and attentiveness, would you be able to bypass the scurvy in the same way that a monk can bypass the cold, the external cold? I don't know. What was your take on scurvy?
Well, I mean, maybe, my, the gory details from what I understand is that if you don't get enough vitamin C, all of your scars open up.
Mm.
Right? Like the vitamin C is like our scar tissue is in a constant state of repair. Like it's not just like the scar happens and then it's closed and then we're good. Like our body is continuing to pour energy into keeping it healed. And if we don't get enough vitamin C, then that process stops happening and the wounds all open up. And also, it's like, it's cool to think that I think it was T Fairy I was talking to, and she goes, we do a lot of work on ourselves, but really it's just the best we can hope for is to get like a +1 or a +2. She's talking about like Dungeons and Dragons. It's like, sometimes somebody has a magic shield and it gives them like +1 defense. Like I might have like, a +1 in some areas, but it's not, but those monks have like, +10 or 20. It's like my ability to be cool in the cold is like maybe like a little bit above average. You know what I mean? My ability to like for compassion or to kind of like read minds or read vibes is like maybe like a little bit better than average. But like I don't want to like test, like I don't want to meditate naked in the snow. Like I don't want to believe that I can keep my wounds healed with willpower or like just vibrational awareness. Like I want to be high minded. I want to cultivate myself, but I also want to like um, be realistic in some levels. Especially like I'm getting like it's not like I haven't even been able to keep my beard brown. I mean I haven't tried, uh, but you know what I mean. It's like we can only do so much. I can't even keep my inbox at 0.
Mm.
How's that for a magic trick? Is respond to all your emails in a timely fashion.
Right. Right. And what you're speaking to here is something that it feels like I've been like questioning a lot of people on, is like, where is the balance struck? And I think a lot of people who go down this sort of psychonaut path end up brushing up against this question. But like, how much time do I spend at the temple in silence, and how much time do I spend participating within the sort of game? Yeah.
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 I mean, it depends on your constitution and like the other choices that you've made and the situations you find yourself in.
Right.
Right. Like
Right.
I kind of thought that I was going to really be doing a lot of monastic work, monastic ish, like a lot of time at the temple or the yoga studio or things like that. Um, Now I'm like, doing jigsaw puzzles with 5-year-olds. It's its own kind of sadhana. It's its own
Absolutely.
spiritual work to like be cheerful, when you get jumped on at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Right. Yeah.
And so people who have chosen not to do that or aren't doing that maybe have more time for other pursuits. But I think that, and I'll pause in a minute, but I think a lot of times people they outsource their choices and say, "Oh, I'm supposed to. Like, what am I supposed to do? What do I need to do? What does God want from me? What is the universe telling me?" God, also like God and the universe, same thing. It's like people just are afraid to say God. It's just, what do you want?
Right.
Like if people could get clear on what they really wanted, then those choices would be easier.
Right. And like this understanding that what you're ultimately interfacing with and asking for answers is like your own mind in a way. You know what I mean? It reminds me a bit of, there's a video, I think it's probably been a week or two since you posted it, but you had posted a video and you were talking about people sometimes taking the message too seriously or too literally, in particular, maybe like tasks, and the sort of like what you were trying to articulate through this example of one of your clients is like, hey, look, like you really thought it was the task that you were trying to do, but the task was just a means to an end to get your mind into a certain place. And that's ultimately what you wanted from all of this. And so, yeah, reminded me a lot of that. Well,
you want me to comment on that further?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have just like we have physical wounds, we have emotional wounds, right? I don't feel good enough. I feel afraid. People don't love me. People are talking about me behind my back. Everything I touch, I ruin. If I'm not hypervigilant, something bad is going to happen. We've got all of these scripts, all of these various pains that we've picked up along the way. Same theme, right? That need attention. So, but it hasn't been modeled for us that it's okay to have needs, right? Like my folks are good people, but definitely kind of boomers and definitely not, that introspective. And so the idea that like we have needs and it's okay, like as individuals to like, it's important to us to be heard and seen and to feel all kinds of stuff. Like it wasn't necessarily modeled. It's like that with a lot of people that their needs have not been put to the forefront. They get repressed. Right. And I'm not saying it's all about us, but it's to some extent, it's like these needs are natural, like they're natural mammalian things that, we get into the isms, all of the capitalism, colonialism, stuff like that's not my expertise, but it's like all that stuff gets pushed to the side. And then we take psychedelics and they start to come back with a vengeance, but we don't even have a language around it. Like we don't even know how to say, I maybe deserve more love. We don't even, it's foreign to us, this idea that I maybe deserve more love.
Mm-hmm. And then if that is the sort of the insight that somebody receives during the psychedelic experience or just mystical experience, insightful experience in general, it's then filtered through their sort of human filter, and so then what you get is this attempt at trying to articulate, like you said, hey, like I need more love, but it comes out in a variety of different sort of flavors and ways that might not necessarily have the universe actually reflect that love back to you.
Yeah, because we have no strategy for getting it. Like we haven't known how to get the love. There's our ability, because it's like I know how to I have a strategy, like an ironclad, foolproof strategy for making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Never fails. I've never set out to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and like ended up with turkey. You know what I mean? But like we have not built the strategy for creating more love in our life necessarily. And so people go out and they're like, well, I know what'll get me love, status. So I should go and like build a thing so that people think I'm important, and then that'll get me love. And then it doesn't.
Right.
But so we think it's like, oh, the medicine wants me to like build a retreat center in Costa Rica. Right. But all I want is like, to sit around a campfire with like my friends in a space of love. Like that would fill the need.
Well,
That would be enough.
do you think that this is part of the reason why then? Because this is a sort of trend that I've noticed and pointed out before in other conversations, is that it seems like a lot of people who go down the psychonautic path, it's like the path of psychedelics. A lot of these people, after a certain period of time, I've noticed it's not everybody, but a lot of people end up with this inclination to want to be involved in it in some way, or to give back to it, or to like have a career in it. And so, do you think that this sort of what we're alluding to here is maybe part of that, and that like these revelations, these insights of opening up a retreat in Costa Rica, it's like this attempt at getting to the root of it, but it's like you think you're getting to the root of it, and you're not. What do you think, man? This sort of psychedelic industry and space is really, really interesting and fast evolving, and you're a part of it. Um, yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't want to like all out demonize everybody's attempt to do cool things.
Hmm.
It's cool to do cool things. Some people are well suited to doing certain things, um, like my friends who run the retreat center Tandava, like in Mexico. Like I think that they're like really well suited to doing that. You know, we were talking about people's constitutions. Like different people have different gifts, and in the immortal words of Too Short, get in where you fit in. Right. And so it's like everybody's trying to find a place where we fit in. And in the immortal words, it's the same, so Too Short and Krishna, Lord Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita saying the same thing, right? Krishna said, it's better to do your dharma imperfectly than to try to do somebody else's dharma perfectly.
Mm.
Right. So it's like everybody, while we're here, embodied as incarnated as humans on a planet, like everybody's got to keep busy. Right. And so we just got to find out, like, what is our role? What's our seat assignment?
Yeah.
And so that's all good. And then the thing about the psychedelics is that they do cause change and transformation and healing. Right. So then even if it's like a longer road than we might expect, and there's more realizations than we might expect, we might not get it all in the first download, as it were. That it's cool that we're walking that path, and it's cool that people are recognizing that they can have an impact, because we're taught to be passive consumers and to just take it. It's like I just take it and I take it and I take it and I take it, and all that kind of stuff. Victim mentality, that kind of thing. And so when people realize that they have a creative potential, it's like, I don't know what needs you're filling by doing the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like you're doing a good job, and it seems like it's probably fulfilling, and it's probably healing for you, and enriching for you in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's probably also, some things that you're avoiding right now, and maybe the podcast is an excuse to do it. And that's just like the light in the dark of anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's like everybody.
Right. I really like what you said. It's better to follow your own karma imperfectly than to follow someone else's perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was really well said.
Well, cool, because it wasn't me who wrote it.
Right.
It was
right,
God.
Chris. Yeah.
He's clever.
Hey, I've heard it said that God's the best comedian, and I think that I would agree with that. I would. So I'm really curious, man. What I've definitely, like, it's funny. Your videos have come across my timeline. These interesting little sprinkles have been a interesting little sweet part of my reality that I enjoy, and I enjoy your insight. I enjoy your words. But like, how did your path take you to this? How did you become a psychedelic integration coach? And I know that you're a lot more than that, but how did you fall into that role?
Well, when I had my, you were saying, like, people have these kind of awakening experiences, like, oh, I should like heal the planet or something, right? Mm-hmm. When that happened to me, it was, like 97, 98. And like psychedelics weren't like a job. Like I kind of, like, you could write, like, to my knowledge, there was maybe like 2 therapists in Berkeley doing the stuff. And then that you could write books like Terence McKenna, or you could make art like Alex Gray. And so I didn't really know how to go about it, but I had been practicing yoga and meditation already for some years. I had a pretty good yoga practice at the time. And I was reading like Be Here Now. Like Be Here Now is my integration manual. Like there's a part in the back of Be Here Now called Cookbook for a Sacred Life. And if you want sort of like a spiritually based integration system, you could do a lot worse than just following the instructions in the back of Be Here Now. And so, I thought to myself, you should probably learn to teach this stuff. It's like I was aware because I was 24. And I was like, I have no skills to help anybody. And so I should try and figure out how to build those skills. And so I started doing a lot of work on myself and kind of meditating more and doing more yoga. And, I was working as the assistant manager at the yoga bookstore, which means I get to read all day and take yoga classes all day and study with, go to kirtan and chant, in the evenings and stuff. And then one day, like the teacher didn't show up and I ended up as the teacher. And then the owner of the studio was like, bro, you can't just like teach yoga classes if you're not trained as a yoga teacher. So why don't I scholarship you into the teacher training program? And so it's like, that's what I was doing for like a bunch of years, was teaching yoga, teaching meditation and that sort of stuff, learning skills that would actually help me work with people in a ceremonial way, right? It brings us back to ceremony, right? A yoga class is a ceremony, right? Or it's, or it's not, but it can be. And so coaching is sort of an outcropping in my mind of meditation teaching, right? I'm not exactly like a Tony Robbins kind of coach, although he's brilliant, where there's a lot of like rah, motivational speaking kind of stuff. It's more like, can we walk together in a meditative space and see what's blocking us, right? That kind of thing. And so I was coaching and I was getting a fair number of people who wanted to talk about psychedelics anyway. I was talking to a lot of, other yoga teachers or body workers or, psychedelic visionary artists and stuff like that. And so psychedelics were part of the landscape of the language. And as sort of the Renaissance came around, as it were, it just started taking up more and more of my time. And I was also kind of realizing the need for integration and aftercare. So sort of started focusing on that.
Yeah, and that's, a word that we've thrown around a lot within this conversation already. I imagine that we're going to continue to. It's a huge buzzword right now within the psychedelic space, and for, the right reasons. But like, how would you define psychedelic integration, man?
Psychedelic integration is the process of embodying the best parts of yourself that you envision in a psychedelic space while healing the most painful parts of yourself that you witness in psychedelic space. How's that? I wanted to do it without saying the word learn or lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody's like, oh, well, you practice the lessons that you've learned. And I want it to be more holistic than just being, it's not the school model. Like the academic model of psychedelics is not my favorite. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to school and I'm going to learn a lesson.
Right. It seems to me like as it's played out for me subjectively over time, it's a lot more fluid than the sort of like school model. And sometimes the way that we speak about it, or the way that I hear other people speak about it, sometimes it feels almost as if though like the psychedelic experience is this thing in which like we're constantly attempting to extract something from, if that makes sense, and like I think that like an earnest attempt to extract something from it that betters you as a human being or increases your capacity for love, like I think that that's great. But at the same time, I think we're like maybe somewhat missing something if it's constantly this game of, or a feeling of as if that you have to extract something from the experience. Would you agree with that sort of sentiment?
Yeah, I don't love that model so much. It has its place, but it moves through us, right? A lot of the psychedelic experience, I think, is reductive. in that it is back to our vibration metaphors and our tattoo metaphors. There's an ultrasound quality, right? There's a cleansing that happens where the stuff that keeps us from being who we are is encouraged to move along, right? And then the parts of us that we truly are encouraged to kind of step into the light and grow.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And with that, it's like sometimes it's not always a new message. Sometimes people revisit the same message a few times. Maybe sometimes it's necessary that they revisit the same message a few times, in this kind of process of growth, if you will.
There's no new message.
Yeah.
Give me a new message. Tell me something new. It's like meaningful, right?
Right. Right. It's like a
Right.
remembering.
Is love not the answer anymore? Like,
Yeah.
is there something else going on?
Right. Right. So, like within, it sounds like this is something in which there's been quite a demand for. I can imagine why, it seems like you've probably worked with a good number of clients. Within the general sort of population, are there any sort of like commonalities that you're seeing, any sort of like very common roadblocks that people come up against? Is there certain messages that are pretty common that are hard for people to digest or work through? Or does it truly seem like different for everybody? Is there some commonalities starting to sprout up within your work after being in this space for a few years now?
Yeah, I mean, people are pretty simple.
Yeah.
Really. Like, there's only like a few ways that things go wrong. I mean, in a variety of combinations. It appears sophisticated because we dress it up. Oh, and then he did this, and then she did that, and then the other thing happened, and da. And I mean, it doesn't, the situations are complex, but what people are experiencing is, a lot of the same stuff that really all comes back to, everybody's like trying to be okay, right? And everybody kind of feels like they're not, and it's not, and so, to what extent they have. I mean, there's a lot of internalized self-hatred, right? People have big inner critics, right? There's a great book by Tara Brach called Radical Acceptance. We just got to be okay with ourselves the way we are. And sometimes that means being okay with us not being okay. People have this thing where they think that they are. I'm just kind of ramble. I'm just going to hit like a couple of notes. I don't know how to organize this that well. So a lot of people think that they're the worst thing they've done, or they're the worst thing that's happened to them. Right? And they're not. That's just like, those are just moments in time. Right? People think that there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of criticism, there's a lot of comparison, there's a lot of need to fix. There's a lot of worry that if I'm not really on my game all the time, then everything's going to fall apart. And that's maybe not even untrue. But it's, how do we handle the fact that we live in a very complex world with very high stakes, in a very difficult situation, and stay calm? I guess what it comes down to is like people's nervous systems are fried. There's a lot of challenge in the world, and people don't know how to meet that without freaking out. Does that answer your question? It's a little,
Yeah.
wasn't the most nice answer I've ever given in my life, I'm aware.
Yeah. Yeah. And like what you were saying there right towards the end leads me into another question that I have for you. And you said people's nervous systems are shot. It leads them into freaking out. Have you ever worked with anybody who, after a psychedelic experience, has faced sort of like psychosis or they call it depersonalization, derealization,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes schizophrenia. I think it's this spectrum of different things, right? But have you ever helped anybody integrate who is within this sort of mind space?
Sure. I mean, I stretch my mind. I mean, part of the reason that I kind of really dove into yoga was like I stretched my mind a little too far,
Yeah.
right? And I sort of started to learn what my mind was for and what it wasn't for.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not for trying to make sense out of the numbers on the license plate in front of me, that's for sure. It is not a good use of my time at all.
Oh, that was funny. That was funny. It made me giggle because one of my this is something I'm working through with one of my friends right now, and it's license
Yeah, it's
plate
like
numbers.
it's an if you know kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's and it reminds me of that quote that the mystic swims in the same water that the psychotic drowns in, right? And I also had this period. It was when I was a younger man in college, and I was taking entirely too much LSD, which I stretched my mind a little bit further than I think I needed to for a period
Mm,
of time, and it really
yeah.
forced me into this period of pretty staunch, cold, like sobriety and a lot of meditation, and it almost felt as if like I it was like a necessity at that point in my life, this sort of like grounding myself. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And so this is kind of like when I say, there's no new messages.
hmm
It's like it for me, and I was kind of lucky that I had a practice already. And I kind of knew the value of yoga practice and meditation practice. And I was kind of lucky because I was out of my mind. I was also out of my body, right? Because the body is our connection to the world, and our body is our connection to consensus reality in
hmm
a lot of ways, right? And, I had a yoga teacher who would walk, she'd walk around and she would kind of like smush my feet into the ground like she was like, like it was ceramics. Like she was like it was clay. She would kind of like just mold my feet into the ground. And, because I was probably, I was an inch off the ground. I was so ungrounded. I was so out there. And, I was hanging out with people who were sharing simple spiritual truths. Like be here now is not a throwaway. It's not just um it's not just something to like write on clothing and sell.
hmm
I mean, I want them to make their money, but it's the simpler we can make things, usually the better, because psychedelics create a divergence of thought. Like it really just like tree, it's like fractal trees of thought that don't necessarily have anything to do with reality whatsoever. Right? It's like, my friends aren't cops and they're not the devil.
hmm
You know what I mean? Like I've seen that there, and they're also, not angels. I've seen them be all of them, and so making it simpler for most of us is really a good way to go. More simple and more heartful. There are, it was even in like an old Silver Surfer comic. Like Silver Surfer got trapped in a dimension and he realized, and it was full of illusions. Someone on Marvel staff was, the Marvel guys were taking acid that month,
of
right?
course, yeah.
Because they were trapped. He was trapped in an interdimensional illusion, and he sat down on his surfboard, and he was like, "Doctor Strange taught me how to meditate." And he sat down on his surfboard, and he focused on the love in his heart, and it dispelled the illusions, and he was freed from the dimension, from the
Mm,
trap.
yeah.
And that's, most of us are trapped. Like we are insane, and then most people are. Most people are living lives of co-signed delusion, right? We're just all generally enabling each other, and so deeply self-centered. Am I going to be okay? What do I have to do to make sure that I'm okay? And we don't even know what that means, right? And we don't even really know what the threats are. We just know that, somebody cuts in front of us online and we think we're about to be eaten. We're going to get eaten by a tiger. It's nuts. And if we can just kind of slow down and see the predicament that we're all in a shared way, and move towards kindness, then, we're going to have a better time. Like, I can release so much tension in my body and so much freak out if I am caring for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, all of the complicated life hacks I'm less interested in. And like, why don't you breathe and journal and quiet your mind and do something nice for somebody?
Yeah, and all of those things that you just described, breathe, journal, do something nice for somebody, it to me it sounds like ultimately like there's this cultivation, and it could probably look like a variety of different things. There's not one size fits all, but it's this earnest cultivation of some sort of like spiritual discipline, right? I'd asked my buddy Dakota one time. He does a lot of traveling and stuff like that, and he spent a good amount of time in India with the
Yeah,
gurus and
sweet guy.
things. Yeah, you might know Dakota.
Yeah.
And I had asked him one time, and it was a very loaded question, but I enjoy asking loaded questions to people who are deep thinkers. But I had asked him, what he sort of thought the point of life was, or maybe to his life, and the answer that he gave me was that he doesn't necessarily think this is the way in which everyone is supposed to live, but he thinks one of the most powerful ways that you can live is to earnestly, cultivate some sort of spiritual discipline. And it's funny, I agree with him whenever he said that, but it's funny because like this 10-year long psychonautic journey that I've been on is ultimately kind of ended me up in the same sort of like conclusion, where it was like after all these different experiences and insights, it was a big core part of it is like this need to kind of sit with myself every day, and using that as an anchor. And like it sounds like it's something over time like you've found is important within yourself as well too, and it's something that you seem like cultivate, with your clients. So like, what is that, man? What is the importance of in cultivating that kind of headspace for yourself outside of the psychedelic experience, and then how does that play into the actual psychedelic experience itself? I just saw some sort of there's some sort of recent study where they showed that people who were actually consistent meditators overwhelmingly had more positive psychedelic experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you need a launch pad, right?
Yeah.
And you need a landing pad. Like, we need solid
Yeah.
ground. We need solid ground.
Hmm.
The kids today have started using the phrase "touch grass" as an insult. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's just get away from the screen, you idiot. It's like, just like, go touch grass. And this is, what we need. And I think that, again, because some traditions maybe have like a lot of accoutrements, like there's a like they make spirituality look complicated. The chants are complicated, and you need a bunch of stuff. You need hats and bells and whatnot, and you don't. But the teachings are designed, in a lot of those complex teachings are technologies for corralling the mind back to center, or like engaging the parts of the mind that are unruly and training them, right? Like those Tibetan traditions that have all those fierce deities. Like, those fierce deities exist to um, wrestle the really unruly parts of your mind back to the Dharma,
Mm.
right? And they found that that's useful, and other technologies just sit, right? And so, one of my favorite definitions of like enlightenment is the absence of greed, hatred, and ignorance.
Mm.
Right? Because we're walking around full of greed, hatred, and ignorance, meaning, we want the stuff that's pleasurable, whether it's good for us in the world or not. We don't want the stuff that's unpleasant, right? And we'll do anything we can to avoid it, whether that's good for us or the world or not. And ignorant was like, we don't actually know what's going on. We can't see past our own ego, our own needs. And so we sit still to kind of notice those, right? It's like we don't, magic powers are cute for a while, but not necessary. It's not, I think people think that they're going to get enlightened and it's going to be 5-MeO all day.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily think that's true. I think it's just, we're at peace, just like one among many in peace.
Right.
And I think that's enough. And if people don't think that's enough, well, that's greed.
Mm. Yeah.
And so contentment, like, how do we just be content?
Mm. Right.
What nerve did I strike? What did I hit there?
Oh no, I was just kind of like, lost in thought, I think. Yeah, they're definitely going pretty deep with this. Yeah, and a lot of this comes back to like the question too. Okay, like why do these fears and these ailments sort of exist in the first place? Why are we having to heal from that? You know what I'm saying? In the first place, right? Obviously, like you can point to traumas and to programming and things like that. But I think like there's this thing that we're doing that is like we're all walking towards this thing, right? Like the death portal. We're all walking towards that, and I think that that's a huge part of this equation as well too. And I think that like the sort of all the mystery schools throughout history and the cults and the religions and the practices and the chants, it's like feels like a lot of it, like what they're doing is like walking each other towards this death portal, right?
Right.
And it's like we're not just walking each other there to get there. It's like we're walking each other there to get there and to like show up to that doorstep in a somewhat good way, Not that like we're going to live our lives perfectly or anything like that. But like you brought up the Tibetans a minute ago, and like them using the deities to sort of like, it's a mind game or interfacing with the mind. And like a lot of what the Tibetans sort of like energy and structure and things around is a funnel into the sort of death portal with one another. Is that something that you see come up at all within your practice with people? Do you think people fear their own death? Is it, you remember that thing we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, how it's like they have a task or they got some sort of insight, but it was just smoke and mirrors to the actual insight lying underneath it. Do you think that like the death portal is something that causes a lot of these like surface level ailments?
Well, so in the Yoga Sutras, they talk about abhinivesha, which is fear of death. And it says it afflicts even the wise. And again, when they're talking about wise, they're not talking about us who have like a +1 in wisdom. They're talking about like the Rinpoches, like the really wise ones. It afflicts even them. But where it comes from, I think, is like we think we're the body. Right? So we have a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of ourselves is really where that comes from. Right? You think you're Gabe. Dummy. It's not personal, you know what I mean? Like I think I'm Dan. What an idiot. So the practice, hopefully, and then even a very well-meaning psychedelic molecule kind of pops up and was like, hey, what if I show these cats that they're not the body, and like we're attached to that. And so it's like, no, really, like, I just want to show you that, like, you're infinite consciousness. Can I show you? Please, can I show you? And we're like, how dare you? It's like somebody is trying to push you into like a perfectly, someone's trying to push you into a pool that's like the perfect temperature. And you put on your bathing suit and you got your towel, it's like you made a beach play, you got a summer playlist, like you did all this stuff. You did all this preparation, people do all of this psychedelic preparation. They got on like a white outfit, you put on your swim trunks, you got your playlist, you got your towel, it's like pool is the perfect temperature. And then, it's like someone's like, all right, go in the water. It's like, how dare you? I'm having a bad trip. They wanted me to go in the water. I'm so afraid. The lifeguard looks like a demon. All of it. The lifeguard's like, ha ha ha. It's like, he's just there to make sure you don't drown. And so again, so it's a fundamental misunderstanding. There's a story Ramana Maharshi used to tell about these little kids made out of salt. Mm-hmm. And they'd sit at the beach and look at the ocean and be like, hey, I wonder what's in there. And like one of the guys walks in, the salt guy walks in, he doesn't come back out. And they're like, that's weird that he didn't come back out. And they all go in, and none of them come out because they are they're fundamentally the ocean. Mm-hmm. The ocean's just salt water, so they just kind of dissolve into where they're supposed to be anyway. Mm-hmm. There's just this sort of like ego, like I'm a separate salt thing,
right?
As to like I'm just like a fundamental, essential part of the ocean. And so if we can kind of get to that. I'm not my mind, I'm not this personality, and kind of let that dissolve into what's really happening, we'll be happier. But it's desperately terrifying on so many levels. And so like the death is, it's all of the things, it's all of the I-ness that we're trying to kind of like, get behind. Mm-hmm. I remember one waking moment where, I was surrounded by demons, and I was like, wait, I was like, I know this one. You guys are just demons. You're just appearing as demons because I have fear. And they're like, yep. It's like, why don't you work on your fear for a little while and see if we change? Hmm. And so I was like breathing through my fear, and sure enough, they were just, average, everyday, interdimensional entities. They're like, we love you. It's cool. Like, it's cool if you're scared of us. Just work on the fear. And so it's like, I really like David Hawkins for like processing emotional garbage. He wrote a book. I mean, his stuff, if you listen to him speak, like you'll get half enlightened just by listening to the guy talk, even if you don't know what he's talking about, because that's the vibration of his voice is so high. And the love that's coming through his voice is so profound. But like that book, Letting Go, and learning how repression isn't the way, and expression, which is another way of saying complaining about your problems all the time to your therapist, isn't the way. But like really finding the lower vibrations and like being with them so that they can unwind and unravel, like, is the way. And like that's that's how we deal with fear of death. It's by dealing with fear.
It reminds me of this DMT experience that I had when I was younger, where I was thrown into this really, really scary landscape. And it was what I would describe as, synesthesia hell. It was the visual component, the feeling component, everything about it. I was thrown into this hell landscape with these demonish type beings, and I was just being shown these awful, horrific scenes, and it felt like this was just going to continue. And the initial sort of feeling that I had going into the experience was a lot of fear, Yeah. And then I started to get sort of like somewhat like agitated and like upset. And I was like, and I started saying this out loud. I was like, and how sometimes you'll like say something within the DMT experience, but it's like you're also vocalizing it like physically out loud as well too. I kept saying that. I was like, and like with the question mark. And that was like the whole message. They were like, okay, like you got it. Like, so what? Like, this is as scary as it can get, right? And then a couple weeks later, I had another dimethyltryptamine experience where I was shown these beings coming up and taking my son and walking him off into the distance, and like flipping out together, right? And it was a different sort of like energy around it. Once again, it was like this, like really like head on. showing me my fear and like having to like face and sort of like digest this fear. And I guess like this can segue us into a part of the conversation I want to have with you today. It's about fatherhood and the psychedelic integration regarding fatherhood, parenthood in general, right?
Remind me how old your kids are.
I have one kid. He's 8 years old.
Cool.
Yeah, I had him whenever I was 17. Do you have any? Do you have any children?
Yeah, I have a 2.5 and a 5.5.
Okay, awesome.
He just, it was a cold day, it's like one of the first cold fall days, and I was picking him up from like arts camp, and I was on the phone with like these psychedelic business people. I was like, I'm sorry, man, like I got to be on the phone. And he goes, well, like, Peter's dad said they could go get hot chocolate. Can we go get hot chocolate? And I was like, I'll tell you what, I'll take you to the Lost Lamb, but you got to go in yourself and buy 2 hot chocolates. He was like, okay. And he did it, which is like, I think, and he did it like it was no problem. Then he was like, can I keep the money? I gave him a 20 and he gave me whatever back. Can I keep the money? And I was like, no, you can't keep the money. He goes, well, let me keep the coins. I was like, all right, you get it. So, you made 50 cents on the deal.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it funny watching them be little people, man?
Yeah. Yeah. And just, it's just so proud. I'm sitting in the car, like watching him. I could get to him if anything went wrong. Like he wasn't, I was just parked right out in front. But he walked in and he walked out and he did it. It was so rad.
Yeah. And it was like, and that's something important, I think, as parents for us to keep in mind as well, too, about like our children. I know it's just like what you were saying, there's just like a small example of it, but like this aspect of like detachment, like while they are our children, we are like always here to like, have that paternal role and, and to embody that in the most godly way that we can. It's like at the same time, these are their own people that are going to go off on their own path, and they're a child of God as well too, and that's something that I think as like a father, I've had to sit with in multiple experiences and like,
Yeah. We're raising them to leave us.
Exactly. Yeah. And so if within your work as a psychedelic integration coach, maybe personally, is there any sort of commonalities that have come up for you? And then like within the people you work with, is there commonalities amongst fathers and parents that you see quite a bit, parents that take psychedelics?
Well, I mean, everybody loves their kids.
Yeah.
And different people, are at different stages of that. Like I'm an old dad, I had my first kid at 45, and a lot of the people started younger than me. So, if I'm dealing with another 50-year-old, it's highly likely that, their kids are going off to college or something, And so I actually worked with somebody recently on that detachment, the grief of that whole thing. And how do we reframe that? And how do we kind of think about that from a creative way? But I'm not sure necessarily. Kids are complicated, and it's fun when they're around. You're gonna have to ask me like a more specific question. I don't have anything really great about it. Great to say, like as far as commonalities go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess just what are some of the things that have come up for you as a father? You're a relatively new father, your oldest being 5.5 years, and it seems like you probably had a backlog of psychedelic experiences before you ever became a father. And so did your psychedelic experiences and your interfacing with that other space change once you became a father? Was there new challenges that came up within yourself in that?
Well, I kind of knew that, my intentions sort of have been for a long time, this reductive thing, like how do I remove the blockages that are in my body so I can channel more cosmic brilliance, compassion, and love through my system out into the world. Right? That seems like a worthy goal,
Yeah.
right? Just love from the center of the universe, let it pour through me into the world. And then even more so with like the kids, but like kids will do a lot for pointing out where you're impatient and where you're rigid and where you're cruel and that kind of stuff. And so it's just kind of more opportunities to become a fluid and open channel. And yeah, and that kind of thing. And of course, and I'm using psychedelics a lot less than I used to. I'm old and I'm busy. But on the times that I do get away, um, I'm I'm somehow, I'm softer and I'm more heartful and I'm more open, and they can sense it.
Yeah.
And they will sort of. It'll be really interesting that, yeah, that it'll invite opportunities for deeper connection that can last.
Right.
And yeah, which is really, really nice.
Yeah. There's this there's this concept that's talked a lot about within our space, but this concept of breaking generational curses or generational traumas, right?
Yeah.
How do you think that this sort of plays into the current state of parents, more parents starting to take psychedelics? Like, how do you think that? What do you think are some of our biggest issues currently, collectively, as parents? And like, how do you think that psychedelics are going to help sort of like start to heal that? Um,
Do you like my rainbow mural?
I love it. It's caught my eye this like entire time. I keep like going from like left to right on it.
Does it look like it was painted by a 5-year-old?
It does. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was looking for a piece of art for back there, right, for a long time. And, I'm looking at, I'm constantly kind of scrolling through the visionary art Instagrams and websites and stuff. I was like, do I want an Andrew Jones? Do I want a Randall Roberts? Do I want an Amanda Sage? Do I want an Autumn Sky? Like all this stuff. And nothing seemed quite right. And it's like visionary artists, if you're out there, I noticed that you're painting a lot more portraits horizontal than you are vertical. So we need more landscapes. We need more wide things. So then I was doing The Artist's Way, which is a great book. And I was doing it with another artist, Jake Coburn, a friend of mine, who painted that thing, but that's another story. And it's all about, again, moving from being a consumer to a creator. And I was like, well, why don't I just like I was like, I can paint my own mural. I was like, I can do it with my kid and it'll be something we do together. And so if we were just chatting, I'd like pull up screen, pictures, like, cause he drew it, like with markers, with, Crayola markers, drew the rainbow and the cityscape, It was like, cool, that's our design. And then we went online and we found a color palette. I think we ended up paying like $9 for it off Etsy, with like all the color. You take them to the paint shop and you're like, I want this. And we went to the paint shop together and we got the paint and we drew it. Like he drew those lines in pencil, we've colored in the lines that he drew. And then we're painting and I catch myself being like, like I'm worried he's gonna mess it up. Mm-hmm. Right. The 5-year-old's going to mess up the rainbow. Right. Right. How crazy it is. And it brought me back to memories of my dad, great guy, not necessarily neurotypical, right? Kind of precise. He's an engineer. He's a precise guy. And there were times when we would be building stuff together and I would end up having to watch like a model tank or something because like he's really concerned that it's right. Like his perfectionism and his need to be right is like going into that and I'm just on the sidelines. Right. And so I was like, oh, don't do that. Let him paint the rainbow. And so I kind of softened that thing like that was instilled in me of like, it has to be right. And a lot of really my persona is like in rebellion of that. It's like unkempt beard, wild hair, like just, not, I'm not, various things that are like loose, like loose and kind of a little bit sloppy in rebellion to that. Right. But this was not that. This was like this was an acceptance and an allowing of the world to be the world, and to let somebody that I love be the person that I love, and let them do their thing, and be okay with it and celebrate it, and not, the old saying, would you rather be happy or right? So it's like choosing happy. And so it's like finding those things and letting myself and be healed, and letting the line be healed by not perpetuating the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How's that? I feel like I really landed that one.
I think you did, man. I'd love to do a personal example, and it seems to come back to this thread of, in that moment you were somewhat cultivating like a spiritual discipline, and the mindfulness involved. You know what I mean? There's definitely like a sort of an active discipline in that, like active discipline. The moment in which you disciplined yourself in that way, that was such an act of love. You know what I mean? Because like you saw the responsibility at play. Like you had the level of awareness to see everything that was going on. And with that level of awareness comes a certain level of responsibility. And I've heard it said before that all love equals responsibility. And we don't love I don't love anything more than I love my kid, man. And so like, there is this deep responsibility involved there. And this like, yeah, man, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. And responsibility is like, what we're talking about is responding rather than reacting. Mm-hmm. Because there's a part of me that really, like, on a nervous system level, on like a primal level, like really was afraid that it wasn't going to be okay. Mm-hmm. Like I have to stop him from getting green over there, or like something really bad is going to happen. And so I had to like, it took me like, so there was a restraint, but there was also like a self-soothing that had to happen of like, you're actually going to be okay. Mm. Like you're not in danger, right? Because we're walking around this fear of death, this death portal. We're walking around like we're in danger all the time. We're not, it's just a kid painting. It's just somebody else like rushing because they're panicked too.
Yeah. And it's like, optimally, at least if you have the level of awareness and it's your karmic path, optimally you can start to like heal some of this inner child things before you have children of your own. But I think that the position that people fall in a lot is that they end up having a child, and then through the process of having the child, it's like this, we perceive ourselves as like the teacher to the child, but there's that very classic saying of like the child is your teacher, and it very much is true. And like in those moments in which you got triggered, for example, by the rainbow, like your child was such a teacher. Like in that moment, it was showing you, and it was showing you your own like inner child. He was showing you that and giving you an opportunity to also heal it as well too.
Well, you can't know.
Yeah.
You can't know what you can't know. It's like you can read all the book, back to the water example, read all the books about swimming you want, and walk around your living room doing this. But, then get in the water for the first time.
Right.
It's like, oh, but like I took acid and thought about swimming. Like, why can't I swim?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like it might feel minute, right? Like that one moment. With the rainbow, but it's not. Like those things do add up when I think about like the effect that this has overall. Like I'm very optimistic about a lot of things, man, but I feel very optimistic about like our children as well too. I think that if done correctly, like even within just like one generation, there can be some really awesome sort of human beings made. And like what is like that to me is probably one of the best, maybe the best gift that you can give to another human being is a good childhood. You know what I'm saying? A good like little launch pad. Um, so yeah, it's the parents who partake within the psychedelic space and reckon with their own soul and integrate that into the way that they parent their children. I have a lot of uh, respect for those people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is, at the same time, I gotta say, there is like a lot of like weird fringe parenting stuff going on out there.
Hmm. What have you seen?
Well, it's kind of like there still has to be some discipline. You know, on one hand, it's kind of cool to give your children like a wide berth where they don't have to hear the word no all that often, but they got to hear it sometimes. You know, there's got to be boundaries, and you know, just because they're your teacher, just because they're teaching you, right? They're teaching you doesn't make them your teacher.
Hmm.
You know, and every there certainly doesn't make them the king,
Right.
right? Like he doesn't like he gets to explore, and he gets a vote sometimes, but like he can't be in charge.
Hmm.
I mean, the 2-year-old is walking around the house a lot with no pants on because we're potty training. He's doing great. The 2-year-old also, we have to keep the doors locked because the 2-year-old loves outside. Fortunately, we live in a very, very safe place. We live on a dead end street. There's almost no car traffic. We live close to the end of it. There's like very little car traffic. We know all the neighbors. You know, the neighbors play in our yard, in our house. We play in the neighbor's house, that kind of stuff. So if he runs across the street to the neighbor's house with no pants on, nothing bad is going to happen to him, but like he's still not allowed to just do that.
Hmm.
You know, so it's like he's got like there's got to be some boundaries. And so finding kind of the appropriate boundaries and the appropriate rules that are neither too strict nor too lax. You know, there's that whole conversation about like permissive versus authoritarian,
Hmm.
right? I think that's a good conversation because I think that there is, you know, I get a lot of parent stuff on Instagram, and you know, a lot of it's good, but some of it is it's like, oh, I don't want to. That lady's mean. I don't want to listen to her.
Hmm.
You know, and that lady's got her head in her clouds. I don't want to listen to her.
Hmm.
You know, and then there's like the middle American guys with, you know, guns who are like, I'm gonna, you know, who want to just like scare their girlfriends, boyfriends, and stuff. It's like that's fucking weird. Excuse my language, but you know, there's a lot of, you know, people are doing their things, and I don't know, not everybody is looking at it the way I'm looking at it. You know, and I'm learning a lot from some folks, but I'm also shocked and appalled by others.
Right. Right. It's I've wondered myself that too, man, looking at like the current landscape of things, and I agree with you that there's some sort of like fringe parenting modalities and strategies that I don't fully agree with, and I think there I think there's an element, an importance to a certain amount of not only just like a child hearing no and being disciplined, but like also like a certain amount of trauma, of like controlled trauma. You know, not that you want to like traumatize your child to into a bad place, but also if your child doesn't face any sort of difficulties and learn to cultivate skills to process and work through that. You know, it's like if you've ever met, and this isn't a blanket statement, but if you've ever met in like a quote unquote trust fund baby or somebody who hasn't had a lot of obstacles in their life, it a lot of times is reflected within their character as well too. Not all the time, you know, but yeah, there's something to that, and that's something I've thought about a lot with Hudson. Is like, how do I offer him like scenarios and opportunities in which he can kind of like sharpen his iron, yet not do like this like permanent damage to him in any sort of way. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think in what is it called? Well, I learned this phrase studying yoga, and the term is appropriate stress.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like when we lift weights, we're putting appropriate stress on our muscles. We rip them a little bit and they grow back stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you want to work on your fascia and your tendons, it's a different kind of process with long holds that are really slow. And that, so the appropriate stress on the tendons that make them grow is different than appropriate stress on muscles. Right. If you do to tendons what you do to muscles, you'll rip up your tendons. Right. That's why alignment in yoga is so important. The alignment is there so you don't shred your ligaments and your tendons. And so, how do we like appropriately stress the kid,
Mm-hmm.
right, in a way that, and then be there for like the repair period too,
Right.
right? The appropriate, I don't even know, and so there's like this Goldilocks zone, right, of not too little, not too much, and I think I was proud when we first started talking about him going into the bakery to get the hot chocolate. I feel like that was, I mean, he took it in stride. It didn't seem like it was too stressful, but it was, there was a little bit of, challenge there that was almost no way for him to like come to lasting harm.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He might got a little embarrassed. He might have spilled the hot chocolate. It's like the people might have been a little grumpy with him or something, but like, he's going to be fine.
Right.
We know those people, they're going to be, it's going to be okay. If he spilled it, nobody's going to shame him for spilling the hot chocolate. Nobody cares. And so, giving them opportunities to like rise to the occasion and mess up, without the shame, I think that that's like a big part of it
Mm-hmm.
is, and it's really interesting. I go on Instagram and people are being taught, people are making reels about if your kid spills a thing or if they pee where they're not supposed to pee, don't shame them. And people are like, "Oh, groundbreaking!" And I was like, "Cool! I'm glad I got that memo already."
Yeah.
And the thing is that I will shame my kids a lot less than I'll shame myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, and let me like, and also it's interesting, okay, because like, what is shame, right? Like shame. I feel like shame to me isn't necessarily like it's not society's like true shame when you actually feel shame. Like it's not society's sort of like expectations of you or somebody else's expectations of you. It's like when you divert from your own internal sort of like ethical moral compass. I think that's when like you truly experience like real shame, when you actually like feel it within your sort of body. And so I can see how if like, yeah, if that's what you're breeding into your kid is to feel shame in these scenarios, it's like shame isn't something you should never feel, but if like that's your go-to, there's obviously like a toxic level of shame, and like shame does serve a purpose, but if you're tapping into these toxic levels of shame, it's like you don't actually know what real shame is for. You don't know when you actually like should be ashamed as well too. Um,
Do you have a
yeah,
working definition of it? What's your working definition?
of shame.
Yeah.
I would say when you, yeah, like I just said a second ago, like when you divert from your own internal um, ethical or moral sort of principles that you've set for yourself. I think that's when like I think like you can be shamed by other people, but like unless those things that you did actually go against your own ethical
Mhm.
principles, I don't think you actually experience and feel shame itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a book called Healing the Shame That Binds You by John Bradshaw. It's like an old classic. I don't know if it stands up. I should probably reread it. And I should probably read some newer stuff on shame. But he makes the distinction that guilt is the understanding that you did something wrong, the belief that you did something wrong, and shame is the belief that there's something wrong with you,
Mm-hmm.
like at like a core level, right? That you're somehow wrong or broken as a being, which is deeply, deeply painful. And so, reflecting back to kids that they are wrong and bad sucks. Sucks to do. It sucks when I catch myself doing it, you know. And, it's like, fortunately, I'm not triggered by the spilling of milk, but there are things that kind of trigger me into it sometimes. And, that's my work to do, because we don't want to impose that on anybody, especially not the people we love the most that we're charged with raising.
Right. How do you speak to your, and I know they're only 2 and 5, and so maybe you guys aren't having these conversations yet, but maybe you're starting to think about how you'll have these conversations with your children. How do you speak to your children about God? It's an interesting part, I think, of a lot of different people's upbringings is their spiritual beliefs within their family units, but also like obviously like religious trauma and things like that as well. How do you think you're going to talk to your kids about God and spirit world?
Well, we do to some extent, and my wife maybe does it a little more. So, we have this spiritual teacher named Amma. She's the hugging saint. I don't know if you know her or not. She's from South India, and she travels the world and conveys spiritual blessings through hugs. And she gives teachings and has meditations and stuff like that. And, I've been going to see her since 2001 or so. My wife is younger than me, and she hasn't been going for like as long, but she went deeper. Like we kind of met, kind of through this community. So she's really deeply into it, and she's really into Amma. Um, and she's guru. Especially to my wife, she's like the guru presence, and the wisdom being. And last summer she came to America. She's getting older. She doesn't come to America every summer anymore since the pandemic, or it's her first time since the pandemic. So we took our kids on tour for 3 weeks to kind of like be in, the spiritual energy, and to like, um, hug the woman and listen to the talks and do the songs and hang out in the kids' rooms and kind of pick up spiritual values, right? And there's a Swami that comes up here. One of her Swamis, very very sweet guy. He's got he's got like a PhD in computer science and writes books about Hanuman, and just is an amazing musician and teacher, and really, really, he's got a really sweet relationship with the younger one, especially. Um, and so, we want them, and again, it's like we want them to be in the vibe, like we want them to be in, and often, like last time we went to the program, like how many chants and teachings do you think they sat through? Like not a lot. Like they're running around, they're playing with their toys, they're building with blocks in the corner. They're barely eating the food that's served. They're eating peanut butter and jelly, but they're like in the vibe with the people, and they're meeting swamis, and they're aware that like there's chanting happening, and we listen to the music in the house, and when we sing our kids to sleep, half the, sometimes it's Monkey and the Engineer, and sometimes it's Om Namah Shivaya. And so I don't know that we're necessarily being like, God is this or God is that, but, we're like, Amma said that we want to be kind to all creatures, like, and so do the wood elves. So I'm reading The Hobbit right now. This was great. I was so proud of this kid. So we're reading The Hobbit, and it talks about the wood elves, right? And the wood elves are kind to all creatures, but they don't like dwarves, and they will kill the giant spiders, right? But for the most part, they live in harmony with the forest. And we had just read that, and then the 5-year-old comes back from camp, and he goes, the big kids are torturing the slugs, outside, the recess. The big kids are torturing the slugs. And I was like, well, like the wood elves, it says in the book that the wood elves are kind to all creatures except for one creature. What is that? He was like, the goblins? And I was like, yeah, well, they don't live in the forest. They live in the Misty Mountains. What are they? And he was like, oh, like the giant spiders. He was like, yeah, like the wood elves wouldn't harm slugs. Like that's not a kind way to live. And then like he came home after school the next day, and he was like very upset that like the kids he wanted to play with were being mean to the slugs, and he didn't want to, and he had to like sit it out.
Mm.
And it felt like, like that, like he's having that level of like ethical struggle
Yeah.
and drive, and coming out and winning and coming out on top, as far
Mm.
as I'm concerned.
Well, and that's really powerful because like it sounds like a somewhat silly scenario as 5-year-olds and slugs, but it's very symbolic of, like that same thing is played out at scale amongst adults all the time. There's all these instances in which it's almost like, and a lot of this comes like down to groupthink, right? But like a lot of these instances in which we collectively all make these kind of small compromises and don't choose the higher. You know what I'm saying? And that I've heard that as like an expression of the devil itself, actually, through us collectively. It's those little moments, and like your son there, in which like he could have just easily joined in and hurt the slugs, with everybody
Yeah.
else, right? And that would have been probably actually the easier thing to do. But it was like he chose the higher within that moment. That was, that, yeah, it's really sweet, man. It's really sweet. And it's been interesting with Hudson. I would say around like the age 6 or 7 is when he started having more questions, and ever since then, me and him have had lots of conversations and stuff. And I have a similar sort of thing going with him, where a lot of it's like I'm trying to instill like discernment within him, like get him to ask these questions and like to answer the questions for himself, if he will. And but it was interesting around like 6 or 7. It'd always be late at night, and I don't know if this is something you've noticed within your kids at all, or if you will at some point. But it really started like late at night for some reason. He started like when I'd be putting him to bed at night, it'd be like those moments at night where it would be like pillow talk, where he's just like, Daddy, he's like, what about this and that and the universe and God? And that was when he first started opening up to me about it. And now it's kind of crept in more into like our daily sort of life and stuff at times. But still, it's like this little portal, this little window. And I think it's like that weird mind space that you get in when all the lights are off and you're going into sleep. You're in that like twilight zone. Me and him have very interesting conversations about God together, within the twilight zone.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think kind of like giving them a platform, the launch pad to dive into the mystery themselves, because that's ultimately what it is.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. It's that book, like Magician, Warrior, Lover, King, about like the male archetypes.
mm-hmm.
It turns out that like that is referenced in The Hobbit too.
Interesting.
They talk about Elrond. It,
Mm-hmm.
it jumped right out at me, and we do this as an affirmation time sometimes. Um, in The Hobbit, at least, like Tolkien thinks very highly of Elrond.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything is very like he's kind of a really good dude. And it said that he is strong as a warrior, wise as a wizard, venerable as a king, and kind as the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're using that as an affirmation.
Yeah.
And he's like, I can't remember the third one because I don't know what venerable means. I was like, you'll get it eventually.
Oh, that's really sweet, dude. I love that. That's a good
Yeah.
one. That's a good one. My mom started doing this thing with me whenever I was a kid, and I didn't understand it whenever I was a kid. She started doing this whenever she was driving, and she would throw back what she called a llama hoof, and she'd do her hand like this. And anytime she said llama hoof, she wanted us to meet her like at the llama hoof at this like point of connection. And it was usually like on bad days or bad moments or when things were quiet and things like that. She'd be like, hey, llama hoof, and we'd connect in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it always, like as a child, somewhat annoyed me, and like I didn't understand it. And then I had forgotten about it, and it was something that I picked back up with Hudson whenever he was a little boy. And I realized whenever I became a parent and started doing that with him, and it was very clear to me whenever I do it to him. I was like, why am I doing that? I was like, oh, because I just want us to have this moment in the midst of all the chaos and mind space and whatever else is going on, a moment in which we cut through the bullshit and we connect with one another, and we touch one another. And so that's like this weird kind of like little spiritual dance thing that me and him have cultivated with each other.
That's cute. That's great. And so we're also seeing that there are generational gifts too. It's not all trauma.
Right.
Right. Like you've learned some good thing, you were raised okay.
Mm-hmm.
Despite any failings your parents may have had, there's some gifts there too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think that'd be beautiful place to end this conversation for today, man. Is there any sort of final thoughts on your mind or anything like that you'd like to share with people?
Thank you, everybody who's listening here. Life is hard. You're doing awesome. Very, very proud of you. Can I show my thing too?
Yes, please do.
So, TAM Integration Instagram page is there, and there's a link to my email. I send out a weekly email about integration and meditation every Tuesday. And then I have a members group where we do group coaching, and I do consulting and Q&A and things like that. That meets every Thursday. It's called the Golden Road. It's priced pretty affordably, depending, it's $50 a month, and there's, it's like $12 a week for a really nice community of folks. And there's also meditations included. We meet weekly for meditations too. And it's really great, especially if it's like seems to be especially for people who are sort of working with others. So like if you're a new coach, if you're like a baby coach, yoga teacher, healer of some kind, it's a great space for those kinds of folks.
Awesome. Very, very cool. Yeah, and I'll be sure to link all of that down in the show notes or description of this episode. But yeah, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. I really appreciate everything that you've put out there and stuff like that, and keep doing the good work that you're doing, brother.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And just, congratulations on what you've created, all of the amazing things, your podcast and your, we didn't even get to talk about like your ethnobotany or anything, but, another time, I hope.
Of course, man. Yeah, I'd love to have you back on sometime.
Very, very cool. Yes, again, thanks for having me. Thanks for everything you do.
Same to you, brother. Peace.
All right, be well.